The crystal chandeliers of the Bluebird Room cast shimmering light. These, across white tablecloths, Manhattan's elite, clinked champagne glasses and whispered million-dollar secrets. At table 7 sat Ethan Parker, 35, immaculate, in a $5,000 suit. He swirled whiskey with one hand and checked his Patek Philippe for the third time. His jaw was tight, his patience gone. This was ridiculous. His best friend, Ryan Carter, had somehow convinced him to try a blind date. At his level, blind dates were ancient history, and yet, here he was, waiting, annoyed, calculating how many deals he could have closed in this wasted hour. Romance, he told himself, was a distraction. The day for weaker men. He built Parker Holdings from a modest inheritance into a billion-dollar empire by staying focused, ruthless, untouchable, until a soft voice, interrupted his thoughts. He looked up, and his world tilted. Standing beside his table wasn't a model or a socialite. It was a waitress, Grace Miller, late 20s, dark hair, pulled into a ponytail, eyes the color of warm honey. She set down a glass of water and said calmly, "I'll be taking care of you this evening." In that instant, Ethan's empire, the control, the logic, the rules, began to crack. Subscribe call. Male deep slow cinematic. Elven Labs ready. Before the story begins, take a moment and hit subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't just watch. Be part of the journey. Stay with us for stories of love, redemption, and second chances. Ethan Parker sat alone, tucked at table 7, his $5,000 suit perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. His jaw was set in irritation as he checked his Patek Philippe for the third time. In 5 minutes. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, scrolling through his phone with one hand, while swirling expensive whiskey with the other. The ice clinked softly, 9, against the crystal tumbler, a sound that somehow annoyed him more than it should. His best friend, Ryan Carter, had set this up. A blind date of all the outdated ideas. At 35, Ethan Parker didn't do blind dates. He didn't do dates at all. His calendar was filled with board meetings, acquisition negotiations, and strategic planning sessions that determined the fates of companies and the livelihoods of thousands. Romance was a distraction he couldn't afford, a weakness he never allowed himself. But Ryan had been persistent, almost desperate. "Just one date, Ethan. One date," he'd said. "If you hate it, I'll never bring up your personal life again. But you need this. You're turning into a machine, and machines don't live. They just function." Those words had stung more than Ethan cared to admit. So here he sat, waiting, For some woman, Ryan promised. He would surprise him. Ethan hated surprises. Surprises meant variables he couldn't control, outcomes he couldn't predict. His entire fortune, built from a modest inheritance into a billion-dollar empire, was founded on his ability to see 3 moves ahead, to anticipate, to dominate. Then, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up, and his carefully constructed world tilted. She wasn't what he expected. Standing beside his table, with a water pitcher and a professional smile, was a woman in her late 20s. Black vest, white shirt, standard restaurant uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing a face that needed no makeup to be striking. High cheekbones, full lips, and eyes, the color of warm honey that seemed to look straight through his expensive armor. "I'm Grace," she said softly. "I'll be taking care of you this evening." Something in her voice made him pause. It wasn't the rehearsed cheerfulness of a career server. There was an undertone of something else. Intelligence, perhaps, or weariness, a story untold. "I'm waiting for someone," Ethan said curtly, immediately returning his attention to his phone. He'd already dismissed her. She was the help, background noise. "Of course," Grace replied evenly. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait, or shall I come back?" "Come back," he said. Without looking up, she left, without another word, and Ethan felt a strange prick of something uncomfortable. Guilt? No, that was absurd. He'd been perfectly polite. She was doing her job. He was allowing her to do it. That was the natural order of things. 20 minutes later, Ryan still hadn't shown up. Ethan's irritation had evolved into full-blown anger. He'd sent 3 texts and made 2 calls, all unanswered. This was beyond rude. It was disrespectful of his time, and Ethan Parker's time was literally worth thousands of dollars per hour. Grace returned, her expression unchanged. "Have you heard from your guest, Mr. Parker?" "No," he said tersely. "Bring me the ribeye, medium rare, and another whiskey." "Neat." "Right away," she said, as she turned to leave. His phone buzzed. Finally. But it wasn't Ryan calling. It was a text message that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Surprise! Your blind date isn't coming. She's already there. Her name is Grace. Don't blow it." "Ah." Ethan's head snapped up, so fast. His neck cracked. Grace was halfway to the kitchen, her posture straight, her movements efficient. His blind date was his waitress. For a moment, he sat frozen, his mind racing through calculations and implications. Ryan had set him up, literally, this whole evening, engineered. To what? Humble him? Teach him a lesson about not judging books by their covers? His first instinct was to leave, walk out, fire Ryan tomorrow morning. This was humiliating. Ethan Parker didn't date waitresses. He dated CEOs, venture capitalists, socialites from old money families, women who understood his world, who moved in his circles, who wouldn't be intimidated by his success or try to take advantage of it. But something stopped him from standing up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the memory of those honey-colored eyes that had looked at him with complete indifference to his wealth and status. When Grace returned with his whiskey, Ethan had already made a decision. Fine. If Ryan wanted him to play along, he'd play along, but he'd do it to his way. Grace, he said smoothly, it seems there's been a change of plans. She paused, tray balanced easily in her hands. My original dinner companion. It won't be joining me after all. Would you do me the honor of joining me instead? After your shift, of course. She froze, just for a moment, before her professional mask slipped back into place. I'm flattered, Mr. Parker, she said softly, but I'm working. I'll speak to the manager, he said quickly. I'm sure arrangements can be made. He reached for his phone, ready to make it happen with a single call. Money opened every door. That won't be necessary, Grace said firmly. But thank you for the offer. She turned to leave, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Rejection. It was foreign, unexpected, and before he could think, he acted on impulse. Wait, he said, standing. Something in his tone made her turn back. I apologize, he said quietly. That was presumptuous of me. I'm not typically this forward. You're not typically turned down either, I imagine, Grace replied, her voice even. And there it was, a flash of something sharp in those warm eyes. Intelligence, perception, challenge. No, Ethan admitted, I'm not. Well, Grace said simply, there's a first time for everything. She gestured to his table. Your dinner will be out shortly. Is there anything else you need? Yes, he said. I'd like to know. Why? She frowned slightly. Why what? Why you said no, he said softly. Most people don't. Grace studied him for a long moment, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt exposed. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. Most people see your money, your suit, your watch. They see what you can do for them. I see a man sitting alone in an expensive restaurant, checking his phone every 30 seconds, who just offered to buy company, because that's what he's used to doing. I see someone who thinks everything has a price tag, including people. Her words hit him like a physical blow. No one spoke to Ethan Parker that way. No one dared. That's not fair, he said, his voice tight. You don't know me. You're right, Grace said. I don't. And frankly, Mr. Parker, I don't have time to. Some of us have to work. for a living. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone by his table. Around him, diners whispered, curious glances, raised eyebrows. He sat down heavily, his mind reeling. In 30 seconds, this woman, this waitress, he'd dismissed as background noise, had stripped away every layer of defense he'd built over years, and she'd seen straight through to the truth. He had become exactly what she described: cold, transactional, a man who measured worth in dollars. This 12 and influence. When had that happened? When had he stopped being the idealistic young entrepreneur who wanted to build something meaningful and become this version of himself, who saw people as assets to acquire, or obstacles to remove? His dinner arrived, brought by a different server this time. Ethan barely tasted it. His attention kept drifting to Grace. She moved gracefully through the restaurant, efficient, professional. But now he noticed the little things, the way she smiled genuinely at an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, how she patiently explained the menu to a table of tourists, the kindness she showed a flustered busboy who dropped a tray. She wasn't just working, she was caring. There was grace in every movement, dignity in her posture. Despite the uniform, despite the long hours, and when she laughed at something a customer said, a real laugh, bright and unguarded, Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. He wanted to hear that laugh again. He wanted those eyes to look at him without judgment. He wanted something, for the first time in years, that he couldn't buy. As the evening wore on, Ethan nursed his whiskey and watched Grace work. He began to form a plan. He was Ethan Parker. He'd built an empire from calculated risks and strategic thinking. Surely he could figure out how to intrigue one woman who seemed immune to everything he'd built his life on. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Parker's penthouse, but it didn't warm him. Not today. He sat at the edge of his bed, hands clasped, staring at the skyline he'd conquered. The city he ruled suddenly felt hollow. All night, he'd replayed her words. Grace Miller, the waitress, who'd seen him more clearly than anyone ever had. He couldn't shake her voice, couldn't shake the truth in it. By 8 a.m., he was in his office at Parker Holdings. The walls of glass reflected power, the kind that used to comfort him. Now, it only reminded him of distance. Megan Price, his executive assistant, entered with her usual calm. "Good morning, Mr. Parker," she said. "Your 8:30 meeting has been moved up. Legal wants your signature on the Fairfax term sheet." Ethan nodded absently. "Cancel everything after 10. She blinked. "Sir?" I have something personal to handle. Megan hesitated. In 5 years, she had never heard him say that, but she nodded. Yes, Mr. Parker. When she left, Ethan sat back and opened his laptop. He typed the name, Grace Miller. Not much appeared. No LinkedIn. No photos. No public posts. She existed quietly, outside the noise of his world. And somehow, that made her even more intriguing. He leaned back and called Ryan Carter. Ryan answered immediately. I was wondering when you'd call. You think this is funny? Ethan said. You set me up with my waitress? Not funny, Ryan replied. Necessary. Ethan frowned. Explain. Grace isn't just a waitress, Ryan said. She used to work at Miller Tech. Ethan froze. That name sounds familiar. It should, Ryan said quietly. You bought them 3 years ago. What? It was one of your early takeovers, Ethan. A mid-size engineering firm. Her father, Robert Miller, was the founder. He had a stroke right after the acquisition. They lost everything. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He remembered the deal. Just another name on a spreadsheet. A signature. A victory. He'd never thought about the people behind the numbers. You're telling me, he said slowly, that I destroyed her family. Ryan sighed. I'm telling you, you never asked who they were. Ethan leaned back in his chair. His empire loomed around him, the empire built on deals like that one. For the first time, it didn't feel like success. It felt like guilt. Where is she now? She's still working at the Bluebird Room, Ryan said. She's been there 8 months, pays her dad's medical bills, takes care of her younger brother. Ethan's voice softened. Younger brother? Yeah. Tyler Miller, 16, smart kid, wants to study engineering. Ethan closed his eyes. He saw the picture clearly, now the waitress with the tired eyes. And the grace that came from holding too much responsibility for too long. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know, Ryan replied. That's the point. The call ended. Ethan sat in silence. Then he stood and made a decision. If he'd built his fortune by breaking lives, then he'd start using it to mend them. That evening, he returned to the Bluebird Room. No reservation, no entourage, just him. The hostess smiled nervously. Good evening, Mr. Parker. Your usual table? No, he said softly. Anywhere near Grace Miller. She led him to a corner booth. From there, he could see everything. Grace was working, focused, graceful, composed. When she noticed him, she didn't flinch, didn't smile either. Back so soon, Mr. Parker. I never got to thank you, he said. For last night. For telling you off, she asked dryly. For being honest. That earned a flicker of something, almost a smile. What can I get you? Coffee, he said. Black. No whiskey tonight? Not tonight. She left, and Ethan watched her move between tables, confident, unpretentious, unaware that he couldn't take his eyes off her. When she returned, he said quietly, I looked up Miller Tech today. Her hand stopped mid-motion. I didn't know. Your father's company was one of ours. He hesitated. I didn't know. It ended that way. Her expression hardened instantly. Professional mask. Voice steady. Of course you didn't, she said. Men like you never do. I want to help, he said quickly. With your father, with Tyler, whatever you need. Her eyes flashed. You really don't get it, do you? He frowned. Get what? That not everything can be fixed. With a checkbook, she said. Some things you can't buy, Mr. Parker. Respect, trust, forgiveness. She turned away and walked back into the kitchen. Ethan sat there, the coffee untouched. For years, money had solved everything. Now, for the first time, it meant nothing, and he realized that maybe real power wasn't in the money or the empire, but in learning how to make things right without expecting anything in return. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the city lights flickering faintly through the blinds. Every word Grace had said echoed in his mind, her anger, her honesty, her pain. She was right. He'd spent years thinking in transactions, not in consequences. And now, for the first time, he saw the faces. He saw the Millers. He saw hers. He saw Robert Miller's. He saw a family broken by his ambition. When dawn came, he made a decision, one that would change everything. By noon, Ethan was in a conference room with his legal team. I want to review the Miller Tech acquisition, he said. The lawyers looked at each other. Sir, that file is over 3 years old. Then dust it off, Ethan said sharply. I want everything. Emails, reports, contracts, every name that signed off on that deal. The team hesitated. No one argued. For 2 days straight, Ethan read every page, every email, every strategy memo, every calculated move his people had made to destroy that company. By the end, his stomach turned. It hadn't been a fair takeover. It had been a slow, deliberate execution. They'd undercut prices, spread false rumors, poached top employees, crushed a family business for a line on a balance sheet, and he had signed off on it all without a second thought. On the third morning, Ethan called his lead attorney. I want a meeting with Robert Miller's doctors, he said. Sir, that's not advisable, the man replied nervously. It could open you up to liability. I don't care, Ethan interrupted. Set it up. 2 days later, he was standing in the long white corridor of St. John's Neurological Center. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Machines hummed softly. A woman in her 40s approached Dr. Sarah Chen. Her tone was calm, professional. Mr. Parker, she said, I have to ask, what's your connection to Mr. Miller? Ethan could have lied. He could have said he was an investor or a concerned friend, but he was done with lies. I'm the reason he's here, Ethan said quietly. My company destroyed his business. The stress caused his stroke. Dr. Chen studied him. Her expression softened just slightly. That's quite an admission. It's the truth, Ethan said. I'm here to fix whatever I can. She nodded slowly. Mr. Miller is in a minimally conscious state. He shows signs of awareness, but hasn't regained full consciousness. Ethan swallowed. Is there any chance of recovery? There's a new treatment, Dr. Chen said. An experimental protocol at Johns Hopkins. Aggressive rehabilitation combined with neuro-drug therapy. She hesitated. But it's extremely expensive. Hundreds of thousands, maybe more. The Bennett family's insurance ran out long ago. Ethan's jaw tightened. Money isn't the problem. What does he need? Dr. Chen blinked. You're serious? Completely. But there's one condition. His family can't know it's coming from me. Dr. Chen frowned. Why do it anonymously? Because I'm not doing this for credit or forgiveness, he said softly. I'm doing it because it's right. Grace Miller has been through enough. She doesn't need to be torn between accepting help and hating where it comes from. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. I'll speak to the hospital board. We can structure it as an anonymous grant. Do it, Ethan said. Whatever it takes. As he walked out, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't redemption. He didn't deserve that. But maybe it was a beginning. Days turned into weeks. Robert Miller was transferred to Johns Hopkins. Ethan covered every cost silently. He watched from a distance as new treatments began. Then he made his next move. He called an emergency board meeting. When the Russian directors filed in, they were tense, uneasy. They'd never seen him like this. Ethan stood at the head of the table. Effective immediately, he said. Parker Holdings is changing how it operates. No one spoke. No more hostile takeovers. No more crushing smaller firms for profit. From now on, we acquire. With consent, we build partnerships. We invest in growth, not destruction. The room erupted. Ethan, that's suicide. Our shareholders will revolt. You'll sink the company. Then let them, Ethan said calmly. I built this company, and now I'm rebuilding it. The right way. Silence. Then one by one, the objections faded. After the meeting, his CFO approached. Ethan, what's going on? This isn't like you. He gave a faint smile. Maybe that's the problem, Richard. Maybe I've been me for too long. That night, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse again. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't chasing power. He was trying to earn peace. He opened his laptop and began writing letters to every company he'd ever destroyed. Anonymous donations. Seed funding for those trying to rebuild. Scholarships for employees' children. One by one, he began to make things right. And though Grace didn't know it, her father's treatments were already showing results. But Ethan didn't call her, didn't text her, didn't show up again. She'd asked him to stay away, and for the first time in his life, he respected someone else's boundary. He loved her enough to let her hate him, while he quietly tried to undo the damage he'd caused. 3 weeks later, Ethan sat in his office, late at night. The city outside glowed silver and quiet. He'd just finished another round of approvals for community investment programs. One small company at a time, he was trying to repair. what he had once broken. It wasn't enough. It might never be. But it was a start. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Subject line: "Thank you." He frowned and opened it. The message was short. "Mr. Parker, you don't know me, but I think you've been helping my dad. The hospital said someone paid for his new treatment. They wouldn't tell me who, but I figured it out. I just wanted to say thank you. Tyler Miller." Ethan froze. His heart thudded once. Heavy. Then again. Slower. He read the message twice. 3 times. Somehow, the kid had found out. And somehow, he wasn't angry. He leaned back, staring at the screen. Smart kid, he thought. Just like his father, just like his sister, he typed. Slowly. "Tyler, I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because your father deserves another chance. You don't owe me anything. Focus on your studies. Make him proud." He hesitated, then added one more line. "And if you ever need help with college, reach out." He hit send, then exhaled. A long, slow breath. For the first time in years, something inside him felt lighter. A few days later, Ethan received another email. This one, from Grace. "Mr. Parker, I know it was you. Tyler told me about the hospital payments. You didn't have to do that." He stared at the message. Her words were calm, controlled, but between the lines, he could feel something shifting. He replied, "Carefully, you once told me, not everything can be bought. You were right. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness, Grace. Just trying to make things right." Minutes passed. Then came her reply. "You can't undo the past, Ethan. But maybe you can do better with the future." Ethan smiled faintly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't hate either. And for him, that was enough. Weeks passed. Grace kept working at the Bluebird room. Ethan kept his distance, though he checked in quietly. Through the hospital, through Tyler's school, Robert Miller's progress was slow, but measurable. And one morning, Ethan received a call. "Mr. Parker," Dr. Chen said, "I thought you'd want to know." Mr. Miller opened his eyes today. For a long time, Ethan said nothing. He just sat there, eyes closed, a small, raw smile forming. "Thank you," he whispered. He hung up, and for the first time, he felt something like peace. That night, he went back to the Bluebird room. Grace was there. She looked tired, but calmer. When she saw him, she didn't turn away. "Coffee?" she asked softly. "Always," he said. As she poured, Ethan said quietly, "How's your father?" Her lips curved. "He opened his eyes yesterday." "That's incredible," Ethan said. Grace nodded. "You did that?" "No," he said gently. "You did. You never gave up." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You've changed." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying, for the first time." Her expression softened completely. Warmth, where there had once been walls. "Then maybe," she said softly, "we both deserve a second chance." They sat in silence, the city humming softly beyond the glass. 2 lives, once divided by power and pain, now quietly aligned in something simple, not romance, not redemption, but understanding. And for Ethan Parker, that was enough to begin again. 2 weeks later, Ethan received another call from Dr. Chen. Her voice was lighter this time, almost joyful. "Mr. Parker, you might want to come in. Robert Miller is awake." For a moment, Ethan didn't move. He just stared out his office window. At the skyline he once thought he meant everything. Now, it meant nothing compared to this. That afternoon, he stood in the quiet corridor of Johns Hopkins Hospital. Grace was already there. She looked exhausted, eyes red, hands trembling slightly, but there was light in her face, a kind of fragile hope he'd never seen before. When she saw him, her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Ethan said quietly, "I'm not here to intrude." He hesitated. "I just wanted to see if he's all right." Grace nodded slowly. "Come in." The room was filled with soft beeps and the hum of hospital machines. Robert Miller lay propped against white pillows, his skin pale, but his eyes awake, aware. Grace was holding his hand. Tyler sat beside him, wide-eyed and smiling through tears. When Robert noticed Ethan, he frowned slightly. There was confusion, then recognition. "You're—" His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Grace started to speak, but Ethan raised a hand gently. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm Ethan Parker." Robert's eyes sharpened. He turned slowly toward Grace. "The man who took the company." Ethan nodded. There was no defense, no justification. "Yes," he said again. "And the man who's been trying to give a small part of it back." The silence in the room was heavy. Grace watched them both, her throat tight. Robert's gaze lingered, long and searching. Finally, he said, "My daughter told me what you've done." "I didn't do enough," Ethan said softly. "But I will." Robert looked down at his frail hands, then back up at the man standing before him. "I spent my life building something I thought would last," he said. "But maybe what lasts isn't the company. It's what we learn when we lose it." He paused, his breathing shallow, but his eyes clear. "If you mean what you say, then keep your promise. Don't just fix what you broke. Build something better." Ethan swallowed hard. "I will," he said quietly. "I swear it." Grace reached over, squeezing her father's hand. For the first time in months, tears filled her eyes, not from grief, but relief. Robert smiled faintly, then turned to her. "You did good, honey." Grace laughed softly, through tears. "I didn't do it alone." Robert's eyes flicked to Ethan. He nodded once, slowly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acceptance. And for Ethan, that was more than he'd ever hoped for. As they stepped out into the hallway, Grace stood beside him, silent for a long moment. "Finally," she said softly, "he doesn't hate you." Ethan exhaled. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," she said. But you earned this moment. That's a start. Ethan smiled faintly. Grace, he said quietly, if I could trade every dollar I have to undo what happened, I would. I know, she whispered. They stood there, two people, once on opposite sides of a battlefield, now bound by something far deeper than apology. Not love, not yet, but understanding, respect, and somewhere beneath it all, a fragile spark of something more. That night, Ethan didn't go back to his penthouse. He didn't go to the office. He walked through Central Park, under the city lights, his hands in his pockets. For once, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He just felt human. And it was enough. 2 months later, New York was glowing under spring sunlight. The world outside moved fast as ever. But inside the ballroom of the Lexington Grand, time felt slower, calmer, different. The air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters, investors, cameras flashing beneath chandeliers. On the main stage, a banner stretched wide. Parker Holdings presents the Miller Foundation, a new initiative, funding scholarships, rehabilitation programs, and start-up grants for small family businesses. Ethan stood backstage, adjusting his tie, heart pounding harder than it ever had during any corporate announcement. For once, this wasn't about numbers, or power, or image. It was about people, about legacy. When he walked on stage, the crowd rose in polite applause. He looked out and saw Grace, seated in the front row. She wasn't smiling, not fully, but her eyes held something steady, something real. Ethan stepped to the podium. The microphone hummed softly. He took a breath. 3 years ago, he began slowly, I made a decision that destroyed a small company. The room went silent. I told myself it was business, that it was strategy, that it was progress. He paused, his voice heavy with truth. But progress means nothing if it crushes the people who built it, if it forgets the hands that make success possible. He looked toward Grace. I learned that from a woman named Grace Miller. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. She reminded me that people matter more than profit, that integrity must come before ambition. He smiled faintly. So today, we begin again. The Miller Foundation is not charity. It's correction. It's responsibility. Applause rose slowly, then stronger, then thunderous. But Ethan wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at her. Grace. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from pity, from pride. For the first time, she saw not the man who destroyed her father's company, but the man trying to build something better. After the speech, Ethan stepped down into the sea of handshakes and congratulations. Grace approached quietly. He turned and froze. Up close, she looked softer, lighter. The constant burden in her shoulders was gone. That was something, she said softly. I meant every word, Ethan replied. I know. She smiled faintly. You didn't have to name it after us. I did, he said simply, because I needed to remember. They stood there, just looking at each other, as the cameras flashed around them and the noise of the crowd faded away. In that moment, there was only them. No power, no wealth, no guilt, just two people, finally standing on equal ground. As the event ended, Grace walked onto the stage. The host handed her the microphone. Ethan watched from the crowd. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "My father taught me," she said, "that failure isn't the end, if you learn something from it." She looked at Ethan, "And I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to believe. People can change." The room went still. Even the cameras paused. Then applause filled the air, loud, warm, unrelenting. Ethan felt the burn of tears and didn't bother to hide them. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about appearances. He only cared about meaning. That night, as they stood together on the balcony, the city lights below, Grace turned to him and said quietly, "You really did it, Ethan." He smiled. "We did it." She laughed softly. And for the first time, since that night in the Bluebird room, she reached for his hand. And this time, he didn't let go. 3 years later, the city looked different. Not because it had changed, but because Ethan Parker had. Where glass towers once symbolized conquest, they now stood for purpose. Parker Holdings had evolved. The Miller Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Dozens of small businesses rebuilt. Hundreds of scholarships funded. And one dream that refused to die finally found new life. A warm June morning, sunlight spilled across a modest campus. On the outskirts of New York, a sign stood at the gate. The Bluebird Institute of Innovation. Inside, students gathered in a courtyard, wearing blue and white robes. Graduation day, laughter, applause, hope. On the front row, Robert Miller sat in a wheelchair, weaker now, but smiling wide. Grace stood beside him, radiant in a simple Emmetink dress. And Tyler, now tall, confident, adjusted the microphone on stage. "Today," Tyler began, "we graduate from more than a school. We graduate from a story." He looked out over the crowd. "My sister once told me that second chances don't come often, but when they do, you have to earn them." He smiled toward Ethan. "And someone in this audience showed me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a better future on top of it." Applause echoed across the courtyard. Grace wiped at her eyes. Robert reached for her hand. Ethan stood quietly at the back, his expression unreadable, his heart full. After the ceremony, Grace found him, Grace near the garden. "Running away before the celebration?" she teased softly. He smiled. "Old habits. Still not used to being the good guy?" He chuckled low. "Not sure I've earned that title yet." She shook her head. "You have." They stood together, watching the students toss their caps. Blue fabric fluttering against a bright summer sky. One cap landed near their feet. Grace bent down, picked it up, and smiled. "Funny," she said. Dad used to say, a bluebird means hope. Ethan looked up. Above them, a real bluebird swooped through the air, a flash of color against the clouds. He smiled faintly. Looks like hope found its way back. Grace slipped her hand into his. This time, no hesitation. No walls. No past. Just the future, and the quiet certainty that both had finally earned it. As the sun dipped low, the students dispersed. Laughter faded into music. Ethan turned to Grace. Thank you, he said softly, for showing me what I couldn't see. She smiled gently. And thank you for becoming who you were meant to be. They stood in silence, watching the horizon burn gold, and as the last bluebird disappeared into the sky, Ethan whispered, Maybe this is what freedom feels like. Grace nodded. Not maybe, she said. It is. The wind carried their laughter through the courtyard, through the gates, into the open sky, and above them, the bluebird kept flying. Free, unbroken, home. Morning light spills softly through tall windows of a quiet country house 2 hours north of Manhattan. The air feels warm, alive, peaceful. This isn't the penthouse Ethan once ruled. This one breathes. Wooden floors creak gently, linen curtains dance in the wind, and outside, a bluebird lands on the white fence, as if checking in on the family it guards. Grace stands by the stove, barefoot, hair tied loose, wearing Ethan's old shirt. She hums quietly, stirring oatmeal that smells of cinnamon and morning. From the living room, laughter. A child's voice. Dad, he took my piece. Ethan Parker, 40 now, kneels by a wooden train set. His son Ben, 6 years old, eyes bright with mischief. You can't own all the tunnels, Ben. Ethan smiles. Life doesn't work that way. Ben crosses his arms. Yes, it does. Grace leans against the doorway. He gets that from you. Ethan looks up. Mock offended. I deny everything. She walks over, hands him a mug of coffee. You always do. Their fingers brush. Just a moment, but enough. The warmth between them is quiet now, not a storm, a sunrise. On the wall hangs a photo, their wedding day. Small, simple. Tyler as best man. Robert Miller smiling in his wheelchair. Grace radiant in an ivory dress. Behind them, a white banner flutters. The bluebird returns home. Ethan remembers that day. The lilacs. The vows. Her voice. We've both lived with ghosts, Ethan. But today, we let them rest. When she said, I do, he felt every scar, every past version of himself, finally fall away. Now, their home carries that peace. Not luxury, but grace. In the afternoons, Robert sits on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, tea steaming beside him. He watches Ethan teaching Ben how to fix a wooden plane. Patience, buddy, Ethan says. You rush, it breaks. Ben frowns. Like you did before you met Mom. Grace laughs from the door. He's been listening again. Ethan sighs. Betrayed by my own son. Robert chuckles. You taught him honesty, Ethan. Can't be mad when he uses it. Evenings are slow. Dinner by candlelight. Stories before bed. Rain tapping softly on windows. Grace still works at the Bluebird Institute. Ethan runs the Miller Foundation, but smaller now, closer to the people. He doesn't wear suits anymore. His hands are rough, his heart soft. Sometimes they sit on the porch swing. Moonlight spills across the meadow. Grace leans on his shoulder. I still can't believe it, she whispers. That we made it here. Ethan smiles. You saved me. She shakes her head. No, you saved yourself. I just held up the mirror. He turns to her. Then promise me something. What's that? Never stop reminding me who I am. She smiles gently. As long as you remember why you changed. Silence, complete, peaceful. Fireflies drift above the fence. Somewhere, a bluebird sings a single perfect note, floating through the night air. Years pass like gentle waves. Ethan's hair turns silver. Grace's laughter deepens. They still dance in the kitchen when it rains, still make pancakes on Sundays, still fight over who reads bedtime stories. When Robert passes in his sleep, Ethan holds Grace's trembling hand. He's free now, she whispers. Ethan nods. Just like the bluebird. They build a small garden behind the house. A stone reads, "For those who lost, and for those who found again." Every spring, flowers bloom there first. Ben picks one each year, places it on the stone, and whispers something only he knows. One morning, sunlight fills the field. Ben runs out shouting, "Mom, Dad, look!" A bluebird rests on the windowsill. Calm, bright, unafraid. It chirps once, twice, then lifts into the air. Grace smiles softly. Maybe it's saying goodbye. Ethan wraps his arm around her. No, he says, it's saying thank you. They stand together, watching the sky turn gold again. Laughter drifts through the open door, through the fields, into forever. And above them, the bluebird keeps flying, free, unbroken, home. 15 years go by quieter than thunder, but deeper than rain. The country house is still there. White fence, wide porch, the oak tree, the little garden with the stone that says, "For those who lost and for those who found again." But the sounds are different now. No more tiny footsteps. No more wooden trains on the floor. No more, "Dad, he took my toy." Now, there are deeper voices, laughter of teenagers, plans, dreams, arguments about the future. Ben Parker is no longer 6, he's 21, tall, strong, with Grace's eyes and Ethan's jaw, a mix of warmth and will. Tyler Miller is no longer the shy kid who wrote "thank you" from a hospital hallway. He's 30 now, sharp, kind, director of the Miller Foundation. The kind of man Robert would have been proud of, the kind of man Ethan secretly hopes Ben will become. This is a new season, not about survival, about inheritance, not money, but soul. It's a spring morning. The house is awake. Birds outside, coffee smell inside. Grace is setting the table. Ethan, a little older now, hair more silver, comes in from the porch, holding 2 letters. He kisses Grace on the temple. "Good morning," she smiles. "You were up early." He lifts the envelopes. "Board wants an answer." She raises an eyebrow. "About the expansion?" He nods. "About selling it." Silence. Just birds. And the soft clink of plates. Grace looks at him. Slow. Knowing. "We built it so no one could destroy people, the way you once did." "I know. So why would we sell it? To a group that might do the same thing?" Ethan sighs. "Because sometimes doing good attracts people who don't want good. They just want the engine." She wipes her hands. "Then we do what we always do." "What's that?" "We protect the heart of it." Footsteps on the stairs. Ben appears. half-buttoned shirt, hair messy, laptop under his arm. Morning. He kisses Grace's cheek. Smells amazing. Ethan smiles. You're late. Ben grins. I was working. At 5 a.m. Asia time zone. Ethan shakes his head. You're going to burn out. Ben laughs softly. Sound familiar? Grace hides a smile. Because yes, he is his father's son. They sit, they eat, and then Ethan says it. Ben, after graduation, we want you to come to the foundation. Ben pauses, fork in midair. There it is, he says. The speech. Ethan frowns. What speech? The come work for the family legacy speech. It's not a speech. It's always a speech. It's an invitation to follow your path, not mine. Grace watches them. Same scene, different generation. Ben puts his fork down. Dad, I love what you and Mom did. I love what Uncle Tyler is doing. But I don't want to sit behind a desk. I want to build things, not just fund them. Ethan leans back. Build what? Innovation schools, tech skill labs, for kids like Tyler used to be, for families like Mom's. Grace tilts her head. That's not so different from the foundation. Ben nods. Yeah, but I don't want to be the guy in the suit, writing checks. I want to be there, in the rooms, hands-on, like you at the hospital. The first time, Ethan goes quiet, because that line hits him. Like you at the hospital, the first time. He looks at his son and realizes something. He thought he was hiding his past, but his son learned from it anyway. Later that day, Ethan drives into the city. Manhattan is louder now, taller, shinier, but to him, it will always be the same. The city he once conquered and later chose to serve. He steps into the Parker Holdings building, but it's different. Logos changed. Walls lined with photos of businesses saved, families rehired, scholarships granted. He did that, not alone, but he changed the current. In the conference room, 3 people wait. Investors, polished, smiling, hungry. Mr. Parker, we love what you've built. We believe we can scale it. International, franchise the model. Bluebird can be global. Ethan listens. They talk numbers, licensing, valuation, returns. They talk about the Bluebird Institute like it's a product on a shelf. And for a moment, he sees his younger self in their eyes. That sharp, cold. How much is it worth? Look. He holds up a hand. I'll stop you there. They blink. One of them smiles thinly. Is the number too low? Ethan shakes his head. No, the number is the wrong language. Silence. He leans forward. Bluebird wasn't born to be a brand. It was born to correct a wound. It was born because I once broke someone, and I refuse to let that be the end of the story. One investor forces a laugh. That's poetic, Mr. Parker. But you can do more good with more capital. Ethan looks at him, really looks. You think money is always the answer. The man shrugs. Isn't it? And just like all those years ago, Ethan hears Grace's voice. Some things you can't buy, Mr. Parker. He stands. Thank you for coming. But Bluebird stays where it belongs. They exchange glances. One of them mutters, sentimental. Another, legacy founders are always like this. Ethan smiles. He's okay with that. He's earned the right to be soft. On the drive home, the sun is low, golden. Farmhouses slide by. He thinks of Ben, of Tyler, of what happens after him. That evening, there's a car in the driveway, Tyler's. He's in the kitchen with Grace, rolling dough, laughing like real family, because they are. Ethan, Tyler says, I heard you turned them down. Ethan nods. They wanted to scale it. Tyler raises an eyebrow. Isn't scale good? Not if it kills the soul. Tyler smiles. Then we protect the soul. Ethan smiles back. That's what your father would have said. Tyler's eyes soften. I know. They eat together. 4 of them now. Ethan, Grace, Tyler, Ben. 4 people who, in another life, could have been enemies, but kindness turned them into family. After dinner, Ben brings out his laptop. I want to show you something. A map appears. Dots, schools, training centers, community hubs. This, Ben says, is what I want to build. Not under your name, not under Parker, not even under Miller. I want it to belong to the kids who use it. Grace leans in. It's beautiful, Tyler whistles. This is bigger than the foundation. Ben nods. It's not charity, it's access. Then he looks at Ethan and asks the question every son asks his father at some point. Will you let me do it, my way? The room goes quiet. Ethan looks at his son, sees himself at 21, ambitious, bright, ready to run, but there's something different. Ben isn't hungry for power, he's hungry for impact. Ethan smiles slowly. I spent half my life forcing people to do things my way. It made me rich, but it didn't make me good. He nods. So yes, do it your way. Ben blinks. He didn't expect it to be that easy. Really? Really? On one condition. Ben smirks. There it is. Ethan points at the screen. Whatever you build, you remember why Bluebird was born. You remember the people, not the buildings. You remember that once your father hurt someone and spent the rest of his life trying to make it right. Ben's face softens. I know that. Story, Dad. I grew up inside it. Ethan nods. Good. Then tell it better than I did. Later that week, a storm rolls in. Grey skies, wind in the trees, rain on the roof. Grace stands by the window, watching, thinking. Ethan walks up. Storm thoughts? She smiles. Always. He waits. She says, they're going to change it. Who? Our boys. Good. She hesitates. I'm just afraid the world is going to do to them what it did to you. Ethan wraps his arms around her. Maybe it will try, but they have something I didn't. What's that? A blueprint, a story, proof that power can be redeemed. And they have you. She leans into him. Do you ever regret giving it all away? The empire, the old way. He thinks. No, because I didn't give it away. I traded it for this. He kisses her hair. For us, for them, for Bluebird, a few. Months later, they gather at the city hall, not for a funeral, not for a gala, for a signing, the mayor, press, cameras. A new partnership, the Bluebird Innovation Network, Public plus Foundation plus Ethan's last big check, a system of learning centers, for kids who fall through the cracks. The kind of kids Grace used to serve, the kind of kids Robert used to hire, the kind of kids Ethan never saw when he was busy buying companies. Tyler speaks first. This began with loss. It continues with repair. Then Ben speaks. Fresh, young, fire in his voice. My grandfather lost his company, my mother lost her safety, my father almost lost himself. But that story doesn't end with loss. It ends with access. The room applauds. Ethan watches from the front row. His eyes shine, not with pride, with relief, because this was the true test. Will the next generation keep the heart? And the answer is yes. After the event, they walk outside. The city is gold in the afternoon. Grace takes Ethan's hand. You did it, she says. He shakes his head. No, we started it. They're the ones who will finish. That night, they're back at the country house. Quiet again. Just wind and crickets. Ethan sits on the porch. Looking out at the fields, he hears the door open. It's Ben. He sits beside him. They say nothing for a while. Then Ben says, Dad, were you ever ashamed? Ethan looks at him. At what? At who you used to be. Ethan's eyes go distant. Yes. For a long time. Ben nods. I think I get it now. You hurt people, so now you protect people, so the math in your heart feels right again. Ethan smiles sadly. You say it like it's simple. It is simple, Ben says. It's just not easy. A bluebird lands on the porch rail, right in front of them, like always, like it knows. Ben grins. They still come. Ethan nods. They always will. Why? Because we kept the name, Ethan says. And because we kept the promise. The bird flutters off, into the dusk, over the field, toward the darkening sky. Ethan watches it go, then says quietly, One day, this will all be yours. Ben nods. I know. Scared? A little. Good, Ethan says. People who aren't scared shouldn't lead. Ben laughs. Mum says the same thing, because your mum is the wisest person I ever met. The porch light flicks on. Grace stands in the doorway. Hey, bluebirds, she calls. Come inside. Dinner's ready. They stand, father and son, future and past, both heading toward the same light. Behind them, the field glows. The house breathes. The garden rests. And above them, somewhere in the fading sky, the bluebird keeps circling, watching, guarding, waiting for the last chapter. The years have thinned into quiet. The fence, the oak, the garden, all there but slower. Ethan Parker moves gently now, each step measured, each breath deliberate. Grace still laughs softly, still hums when she cooks, but her hair carries silver, like the moonlight that used to follow her. Inside, photographs line the walls. Bluebird Institute, Miller Foundation, graduations, weddings, children of children. Ben and Tyler run it all now. They call once a day. They visit on weekends. But tonight, it's just them. Ethan and Grace. Evening light spills across the porch. The sky burns gold, then fades to violet. Grace sets 2 mugs of tea. Dr. Chen called, she says. Robert's garden project is fully funded again. Ethan smiles. That's good. She watches him. You don't say much anymore. I used to say too much. She laughs. True. They sit in comfortable silence. Only wind, and the soft chirp of a bird somewhere close. Later that night, Ethan can't sleep. He walks out to the porch alone. The fields glow under starlight. Distant city lights pulse like ghosts on the horizon. He leans on the rail. The wood is rough beneath his hand, familiar, grounding, and he whispers to the dark, I did my best. Behind him, the door opens. Grace steps out, wraps a shawl around his shoulders. You did more than your best, she says. You changed what the world meant to us. He looks at her. The love in her eyes is quiet, endless, the kind that forgives everything. He reaches for her hand. Promise me something. Anything. When I go, keep it running. All of it. The foundation, the school, the garden. She smiles through tears. It's already in their hands. He nods. Satisfied. Morning comes softly. The world is grey-blue before sunrise. Grace finds him still on the porch, still and peaceful. His hand rests on the arm of the chair. A blue feather lies beside it. She knows. Before anyone says it, she kneels, presses her forehead to his hand. Fly home, she whispers. Days later, friends, family, students gather, not to mourn, to celebrate. Ben stands at the podium of the Bluebird Institute auditorium. Behind him a portrait of Ethan Parker. Beneath it, one sentence. Freedom isn't escape, it's redemption. Ben speaks slowly. My father wasn't a perfect man, but he spent his life becoming better than he was. He taught us that forgiveness is not a gift, it's a discipline, and that love is the hardest form of courage. Tyler steps forward, adds quietly, he saved my family, and then he let me save his. The crowd stands. Applause rises like rain. Grace watches from the front row. Tears fall, but they're gentle ones. That evening, she returns home alone. The house feels lighter than grief, as if he never left. She opens the window, the wind moves through the curtains, and then she hears that song. A bluebird, on the fence, singing softly, same note, same rhythm. Grace smiles. Hello again, she whispers. The bird flutters closer, perches on the windowsill, looks at her, unblinking, unafraid. She laughs through tears. I know. He's okay. It chirps once, then lifts off, up past the garden, past the fields, into the wide blue sky. Years pass. The house remains. The foundation thrives. Ben and Tyler build more schools. Grace becomes the quiet voice behind every new one. Whenever she visits a new campus, she asks for one thing: a small birdhouse, painted blue, nailed to a window facing the east, for hope, for beginnings, for him. One final scene. A young student 8 years old runs across a playground with a notebook. She points at the birdhouse. Look, she cries. There's a bluebird in there. Her teacher smiles. Do you know why it's called that? The girl shakes her head. Because a long time ago, someone believed that even broken things can fly again. The child looks up, eyes wide, and somewhere above the trees, a blue feather drifts down, landing quietly on her page. The camera pulls back, wide shot, golden sky, a flock of bluebirds rising together, and a voice calm, familiar echoes. Maybe this is what freedom feels like. Fade to light, fade to wind, fade to home. And the bluebird kept flying,